good afternoon. Good afternoon. Lovely afternoon, actually. 60 degrees in middle of January. Can't beat that. My name is Mong Min. I'm with Global Sourcing Council. I'm a board member, and I'd like to welcome you today to a timely and interesting topic discussion, the world of sustainability. And we've entitled our program today, Demystifying Sustainable Development Goals and Business Challenges. Two pieces of appreciation. I'd like to thank Baruch College for graciously providing us the world-class facilities that we're enjoying today. So thank you very much, Baruch College. And also to EcoVadis for sponsoring our event today. We have an action-packed 2 hours. And in terms of our agenda, as you can see on the side, we have quite a few key items. I will welcome our chairman of Global Sourcing Council, Wanda Lobush, and she's going to talk about, if you would just wait for a moment, Wanda, she would talk about the state of the Global Sourcing Council. We then have our keynote speaker, Evan Harvey from Nasdaq, who will talk about sustainable development goals and perhaps the impact of SDGs on business today. Following that, we have a very interesting discussion by Dr. Arnaud Brohe. He's with CO2 Logic and also with Imperial College of London, where he'll talk about value of carbon accounting. He's well-established expert in this area and having written a number of books in this matter. After that, we hope to have a very interesting, exciting discussion, forum panel discussion on demystifying SDGs and business challenges, which I'll facilitate. And with me joining here would be Patricia Chavez from the UN, Mert Demer from Baruch College, who is a researcher here. And we also have folks from the industry. We have Danielle Healy from Intercontinental New York, Barclay, that's the well-known hotel chain, EcoVadis' CEO, Pierre-François Thaler, and we will also have a person who's come all the way from St. Louis, representing Monsanto, Branta Cockrell. And followed by that, we'll have Q&As, and depending on how things are going, we can have Q&As as we go along. We'll see about that. And once we're done at 5 o'clock, that comes the good part. We'll have the networking session with wine and cheese, compliments of EcoVadis. So with that, I'd like to welcome Wanda Lobush.
We are absolutely delighted to have the room full of such a distinguished guests, experts, and individuals who are interested in the topic of sustainability. Not only the topic, but taking this big concept and bringing it down to earth. As I shared with some of you before we started, our expectations are to have genuine discussion, the real conversation about embracing those big, wonderful ideas of 2030 agenda into our standard operating procedures. We don't want this discussion to be politically correct. We want to challenge our way of thinking, our way of approaching these monumental changes. And at this point, I would like to invite you to this reflective piece. Happy 2017, everyone, from Global Sourcing Council. Let it be clean, green, and responsible. That's a lot to ask for, but we like big, bold challenges. Global Sourcing Council has been created 10 years ago on the idea of bringing global citizenship to bottom lines of companies. We knew that the lowest cost destinations will not address the needs of global business. And that's how the organization was conceived. Over the past 10 years, we reevaluated our value proposition, our business goals, and we are entering the second decade with the goal of pursuing profit with purpose in global business, especially through global organizations and global functions. So our mission, again, is to transform the world through business, where companies pursue profit with purpose. We want to achieve it through educating, advocating, and inspiring our global membership. 20,000 of professionals involved in global business are directly connected through our digital channels. In the heart of our mission and vision are partnerships, like Partnerships for the Goals. We understand that it takes the village to bring the change about. So through our partnerships with like-minded organizations, from sourcing, procurement, outsourcing, financial specs, we are reaching approximately 150,000 professionals all over the world. The partnerships with the global media organizations, such as 3BL, allows our messages and our propositions to be seen by approximately 1 million people throughout the world. That is a significant reach, and we want to make sure that the messages that are crafted throughout our membership will go to the furthest corners of the world. On September 24, 2015, the historical unprecedented event took place in the United Nations. 193 member states signed the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development titled Transforming Our World. That agenda is framed by 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we will be talking about today. And it is to charter our journey for the next 15 years. As of last year, Global Sourcing Council adopted the 2030 Agenda as the umbrella program for our initiatives So we educate, inspire, and advocate through outreach and our educational program, through thought leadership, through meetings like the one today, on the issues related to sustainable global development. Again, we do not want these discussions to be politically correct. We want to get to the business of sustainable development goals, of the discussions that will enrich us in terms of learning what works and learning from what doesn't work, how to implement the change. So Global Sourcing Council has received the consultative status of the United Nations Division of Economic and Social Development. As such, we are representing the sourcing community at the UN discussions and tables on the issues related to sourcing. We of course, sign under the Goal 17 Partnership for the Goals, and our initiative has been to pose the challenge to the industry to showcase the best practices in how the goals can be adopted in business through pledging the support to the goals through the $500 million challenge or $10 billion challenge. Let me explain. We are asking businesses to come forward and pledge real and material resources towards individual goals. The goal, the first stage of the pledge is ends on the second anniversary of signing 2030 agenda, which is September 25th, and we invite members of our community to contribute to that goal. We hope to achieve $500 million pledge. For some of you, that may be a huge number. For a number of you in this audience, that may be a very small, humble goal. As we have in the audience here, the leaders from the organizations that have been doing, walking their talk in terms of adopting sustainable development goals, and that number, $500 million, is very much attainable and accounted for. Again, we invite everyone in the audience to participate. In 10 years, we hope to bring $10 billion pledged by industry to individual sustainable development goals. If you go on our website, www.gscouncil.org, you will see the first pledges coming in. We are very proud of those first pledges, and we are expecting you following up the leaders in the space. Last but not least, in the framework of Sustainable Development Goals, we are continuing with our flagship program, which is the Awards in Sustainable and Socially Responsible Sourcing. That program will end up this year, its 5th edition, on May 10th, in the United Nations at the grand finale, where the awards will be presented to the social entrepreneurs from all corners of the world. These companies will be selected by the world-class panel of experts and practitioners in the sustainability in business. So today, without taking any more time from the agenda, I would like to invite the participants to the discussions. And please, for those of you who are not members of Global Sourcing Council, we encourage you to join us. Here is the new elected board for the Global Sourcing Council. And just for few seconds, I would like to ask the present members of the board, for the members who are present here in this room, to please do stand up. So and no, Karen. So these are Lou Coppola, Armand Broch, Hernandez, I'm sorry, Julian Hernandez, Monin, Karen Morris, and Noel Smith. Please stop by, say hello, engage the board members in the discussions, do challenge us. And we want to hear your voices, your opinions, and your views. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Wanda, to get us going. So, key topic of our agenda today is our keynote speaker. And it is my pleasure to introduce you Evan Harvey. Evan, our keynote speaker, is Director of Corporate Responsibility at Nasdaq. He directs the sustainability effort at Nasdaq, helping to make exchange in all of its listed companies more transparent, efficient, and responsible. In this capacity, he oversees the research, analysis, writing, and publication of virtually all major sustainability reports. And you can well imagine how many there are. Evan is also responsible for investor outreach, media relations, sustainability partnership, executive speech writing, and major event planning. Evan has more than 20 years of experience in marketing and communications, which serves him well in this role, but he has augmented these skills with new learning in resource management, environmental science, and human rights. Evan tells me that he's proficient in French, so maybe we'll test him later. He is a graduate of University of Texas. So, Evan?
In fact, I'll be delivering my remarks in French today, so I hope you're ready. Thank you very much. It's great to be invited here, my friend Wanda and the GSC. Thank you very much also for cutting very courteously into the time slot that I was allowed, because there's no way I could fill 30 minutes. And I have to tell you that I printed out my speech in very small font on this paper. So if I look down most of the time, it's not because I don't care who's in the room or I'm very bad at engaging with you. It's because I'm very bad at engaging with people in general. So I've been asked today to talk about a few things, including the general business implications and value of sustainability and the UN Sustainable Development Goals in particular, particularly demystifying the Sustainable Development Goals, which is good for me because I usually work in the opposite direction, but we're going to try and bring some clarity. Also, if appropriate, NASDAQ's opinion on the same topics. Well, I think it's certainly appropriate to discuss that, maybe not as simple as it might seem. So I come here representing NASDAQ, which is a moderately sized public company with a small physical footprint, but a giant brand and a global market reach. It probably won't surprise anybody in this room to know that there's no clear consensus, even within our fairly small organization, on the value of sustainability. Not loud enough?
I'm just moving the slides.
Oh, now my flow is disrupted. Oh, there I am.
You're back on, sorry.
Where was I? No, right, no consensus. No consensus on sustainability, certainly not on the SDGs, but no consensus on the business value of sustainability in general. NASDAQ is a different kind of business. Although considered mainly a US equities market, we also run markets in many other countries, especially the Nordics. And that is just a small part of the overall business. We are really more of a technology company, and a fintech company at that, as our new CEO will tell you. Market technology, data products, futures, options, indexes, corporate services, increasingly corporate services. That's most of what we do. And all those business lines have different perspectives on sustainability. Here's just a few of the things that I've heard over the last 5 years. The listings group consistently wants to lighten the disclosure burden on companies. They want to make it as easy as possible to run their company publicly. The technology team wants to fund and fuel more efficient data centers. The Nordic commodities team wants to focus on a market-driven price on carbon. And the index guys wonder why our green family is so thinly traded. So all of these different business lines coming at sustainability in a slightly different way, all using different language to talk about what I think is a common denominator, the sustainability of business overall. And that's just the revenue generating lines. On the operational side, I have the pleasure of navigating different concerns and expectations from legal, HR, the board, the facilities team, investor relations, and so on. Probably have heard this before from others. Perhaps in this way, on the operational side, Nasdaq is not so different from any other company. But one of the comforts of my job is that I get to stay a little bit above the fray. I get to drive consensus between warring factions, sometimes viciously warring factions, keep my eyes on the good of the enterprise. It's a mission that I take seriously, I think has real value. I also believe that we have a responsibility as an exchange and as a business to drive fair and inclusive capital formation, and even to some extent, global economies. We power so many markets, so much market technology all over the world. It's not an exaggeration to say that the philosophical and financial considerations that we build into our products have global impact. Our advocacy for sustainable business practices is inevitably tied to the general good of the investment ecosystem. We often express this belief by focusing on three key stakeholders. Investors. Investors make better, longer-term investments when privy to sustainability data. Absolutely believe that. Companies. Companies that integrate sustainability data and performance standards are more likely to prevail in the long term. I've seen that happen. 3, regulators. Regulators need compliance signals that go beyond the traditional balance sheet in order to do their jobs. Exchanges are the only enterprise that are really uniquely positioned, if not incented, to meet the needs of all three. And by doing so, we have effectively created healthier, safer, and more equitable markets, at least I hope. This isn't a philosophical endeavor. Environmental, social, and governance metrics, ESG data is vital to our enterprise and our own business model. All right, so filling more time here, it's a very long-winded way to say Nasdaq is for sustainability, no surprise there. Generally, depending on your definition and with certain caveats, but let's talk about the fun stuff, the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs began in 2015 as an ambitious UN-backed attempt to address and remediate many of our most pervasive and difficult problems. Under each of the 17 broadly defined goals, somewhat specific and measurable targets are set for the year 2030. But how specific are they really? Let's look at goal number 2, zero hunger. Certainly a goal that we can all get behind. But I don't know a single business person or a person of any kind who would argue that people shouldn't be fed. I probably couldn't find many who actually believe that they bear zero responsibility for zero hunger. But look at the targets themselves. Quote, by 2030, end hunger and ensure access by all people, in particular the poor and people in vulnerable situations, including infants, to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food all year round. Now, the dynamics of supply and demand and trends toward extreme overpopulation in some regions would seem to make this an exceedingly difficult task, let alone an almost immeasurable one. And whereas that target seems too broad to the typical businessman reading this list of goals, goal number 14, life below water, might be too specific. One of the targets under goal 14, quote, provide access for small-scale artisanal fishers to marine resources and markets. I'm not exactly sure how a banker in Illinois or a bartender in Paris or a billionaire in the White House could properly address that issue, even if they should. That's not to say that they have no part to play. We have to find the right connections, we, meaning we in this room, have to find the right connections, create efficient avenues of engagement between the smallest and the most modest of us and the grandest, most daunting tasks. So what do we, meaning us writ large, the inhabitants of the planet, need? Why do we need the SDGs? I think there are 3 reasons that come to mind. The global scale of these issues, beyond the scope of any one person, the interconnectedness of these issues, certainly. And if we focus on the small stuff and we have a framework that we trust, then we can be confident that the big stuff keeps moving forward in the right direction. That's what I think the SDGs help us to provide and to explain. As individuals, we have to focus on making small but measurable impacts every day. That's how the population moves forward, with us all leading from the bottom up. You know, as the actor, I was reading some things on the SDG website. So the actor Forrest Whitaker, who happens to be a UN SDG advocate, he wrote a very interesting blog post on the SDG website. Quote, leadership is not about epic decisions. It is about the choices we make in our daily lives. It is only in retrospect that they seem epic. You might be thinking, what can Oscar-winning actor Forrest Whitaker teach me about business? But I think that what he said there was actually pretty important. It's often difficult to see the forest for the trees. If we stay focused on little things that we can control and do in our own lives and our own little ways that we're contributing to the accomplishment of each of the SDGs, you have to have confidence that the general picture is moving forward. Now, I would argue that the SDGs were built and intended primarily as business guidance tools. Business really offers the only interconnected global system to achieve these goals. We once thought that governments were the glue that would hold the global effort together, but as we saw with the Millennium Development Goals, we now recognize that businesses are key. Why do businesses, meaning businesses both large and small, familiar and foreign, care about the SDGs? Well, 3 reasons come to mind, because 3 is a great number. Supply chains transcend walls and borders. That's happening for companies both large and small. I'm sure the people in this room have seen that happen. Vital sources of innovation can be found by focusing on these global issues. It is not just remediating a problem, it is also a source of opportunity. And it's quite possible that we could no longer, or a company could no longer build a particular widget or run a particular service in exactly the same way for very long because of the perils of what we're dealing with. So how are businesses understanding, integrating, and acting upon the SDGs? Where are we right now in terms of general business and their uptake on this project? In my experience, which may be kind of limited, I don't think that they're doing much of anything right now. I think not most and not yet, not to be too pessimistic. The SDGs are still struggling for recognition and acceptance in a crowded marketplace of good ideas. Awareness is very good at the top end. On the Nasdaq family, we have 100 or so companies that have committed to doing something on the SDGs. They tend to be the large caps. They tend to be the ones that are outperformers on sustainability in general. But it's almost absent at the middle and the bottom. We are leaving some companies behind. And if they're not squeezed through a supply chain or some other way, they are definitely being left out of the conversation. You know, Nasdaq lists 3,300 companies, more or less. So we're talking about 75% of our universe, essentially absentee from the discussion. Certain industries, consumer goods, manufacturing, tech, biopharm, seem to be leading. Others seem to be completely absent from the table. I'm not sure what's inhibiting the rest. It could certainly be a lack of resources. That's the one that we hear the most. A lack of understanding. I think it's more likely both. I'd like to think that this isn't driven still by a sense of complacency. The perils of climate change are present. Global economic and social dysfunction kills businesses as well, unfortunately, as the people that work in them. The connections between sustainable business management and long-term business vitality have been established. I believe that even those companies that profess no interest in publicly reporting on their ESG performance are in fact measuring it behind the scenes. It's too valuable. We have a management style now that heavily relies on data and data-driven decision-making. These are vital pieces of data in that analysis. So where do we go from here? So I'm going to read a quick passage from a blog post that I wrote. I can't compete with Forrest Whitaker, but in November of last year, just after the election. The next few months promise to be momentous ones. The rise of Trump and a Republican-controlled Congress is likely to have an impact on U.S. business regulation and the SEC in particular. We've already seen that. It is yet unclear what impact this will have on the progress being made. However, it is important to note that many stock exchanges have been trying to build consensus on the value of ESG markets in ESG metrics in the capital markets and show no signs of stopping so. There have been increasing regulatory signals from the rest of the world. European Commission Non-Financial Reporting Directive, for example, and the United Nations wants businesses everywhere to turn their attention to the SDGs, an ambitious attempt to remediate issues by 2030. That was a bit innocent still, even then, 2 months ago, perhaps a bit more pessimistic now, but the point is, I think more than ever, the SDGs loom very large. So one last quote from a business hero of mine, Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia. Many of you know, many of you read one of his books, Responsible Company or Let My People Go Surfing. Quote, when we make decisions that are right for the planet, he said, it makes us money. Now, he was being a bit cheeky, of course, and certainly a little reductivist, but we should always bear that maxim in mind when translating something as ambitious as the SDGs into a business context. Business leaders, strategies, products, services, supply chains, oversight, regulations, revenues, the focus has to stay on the money. Over the long term, 2030 is still pretty long term, we have to keep in mind these key messages. The SDGs create cost savings. The SDGs drive revenues. The SDGs reward investors. The SDGs attract talent, and the SDGs create competitive advantage. We may have a fundamentally personal dedication to sustainability, I certainly do, but we cannot and should not presume that everyone in the business world shares that calling. You have to speak the language that works for them. By translating the value proposition of the SDGs into measurable terms, businesses are ultimately measured in profits and losses. We empower the SDGs to flourish where they most need to, and that's in the darkest and most powerful corners of our economy. So I'll leave it there, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yes.
Yes, so you mentioned that about 75% of the Nasdaq universe, if you will, is not addressing what you spoke about.
That's my guess. I mean, my friend Bahar is actually working on this to help us get a better understanding of that, but that seems to be what the evidence is showing us.
So going forward with this pledge, by the way, just running this pledge coming up in September, is there a plan internally with Nasdaq to communicate internally to that audience of 75% on how they can address SDG and achieve what you just did in your closing?
Yes. In fact, I don't want to say that we pummel them with messaging, but we try to reach them in a million different ways. We do webinars, we do white papers, we do one-on-one engagements, we do CEO to CEO conversations on an individual basis. We also try to invite large groups by sector and industry at the small end to come on and discuss issues like this at a roundtable. So we have been trying to get information not only about the SDGs, but about the business value of sustainability in general in front of them for a long time.
Is that live or is that public available? Is that information?
Usually public, yeah, could be. If you want to participate, it's certainly open. The webinars that we run on a quarterly basis are sent to NASDAQ issuers, but everyone is welcome to join and ask questions.
That's fine. Repeat the question.
I'll repeat the question, yes.
Please.
So my question is, you mentioned that a couple of industries are showing some leadership, and I was wondering if you could give a few specifics of what that looks like from your perspective.
Well, it's tiresome, but I cite Intel so often. They do so many things so well. I know people are tired of me touting them. I mean, they're one listed company among 3,300, but they just happen to have an organic approach to all of these issues. The way they organize sustainability within the organization, the way it trickles into specific projects like supply chain management and HR issues and legal issues and issuer and investor engagement. Investor engagement for them. It's just, they seem to be leading by example. And I think that part of that is the Electronics Industry Citizenship Coalition. I think that there's an emerging set of good practice standards that come from that industry. So we have good performance from Intel and Microsoft and Cisco and a lot of others too. But Intel is the one that always jumps to the top of my list. And it's almost, no matter which sustainability related issue we talk about, they seem to do it well. And they seem to have unlimited resources and people. It's a nice problem to have.
And if I may, not to put you on the spot, which company are you representing, please, and your name?
Say Intel. One more?
And repeat.
Yes, sorry.
I can say the question very loudly.
Oh, you certainly may.
Thank you, first of all, for so many salient points, and two resonate, I think, particularly with us at the Global Council. So your allusion to the act's definition of leadership as small choices every day, I think a very powerful message, and thank you for underscoring that. And of course, profit with purpose is a fundamental message of the Global Sourcing Council. But this brings me to a conundrum that I'd like your point of view on, which I call the golden goose problem in publicly listed companies, which is to say, if you propose in the context of a choice to be made today, a small one or a big one, to a CFO, I can either give you a golden goose's egg in the fourth quarter of this year, or I can give you this goose, but you'll have nothing this quarter. And we know where those choices tend to go. So in terms of a commitment to sustainability, always through the lens of purposeful profit, what's your view on how we solve this short-termism versus long-termism, big sustainability versus a small gesture today that simply keeps the status quo ticking over more or less?
I'm going to be controversial and speak personally, but I think that investors are hugely important. I think that investors have signed on paper to pressure public companies and PRI signatories and others to conduct themselves better and to focus more on the long term and to invest in the long term, but haven't necessarily, or at least transparently, followed through in terms of engaging with those companies. I think that if you're trying to get the attention of a public company in particular, that's really where you get their attention. I'm not going to make an argument about proxy access, but all the channels that are available to them in order to drive better company behavior, extremely effective, and can be a very coordinated campaign for investors that have an increasing amount of concern for this, and they're almost all of them engaged integrating that analysis into their algorithms one way or the other.
We will take one more. Okay.
I don't think that's me.
Hi, so we are live streaming right now.
Oh,
And I think someone may be taking us to a very personal place. So continue with your question and I'll work on the sound. Thank you.
I hope that wasn't a criticism of my remarks.
Does Nasdaq focus on a specific one?
17.
Do you have any metrics or measurements to see how well they're doing, what the effectiveness?
Hopefully this year we'll publish that. So the question was about, does NASDAQ focus on a particular one? We were asked by the UN Global Compact, and I sit on the US Network Board for the Global Compact, to focus on 4 or 5, but NASDAQ in particular has had an emphasis on 17. As I mentioned earlier in my remarks, so globally interconnected, so tied to so many different exchange and market models around the world. That's really where we can bring a lot of leverage. So, and yeah, we'll be publishing this year our measurable metrics around driving performance on that goal.
So, great questions, and we'll have plenty of opportunity to ask our panelists, and later on, especially when we have our panel discussion, we have representatives from business who are currently implementing or are in the process of implementing some of the SDG goals. So please hold your questions then, and I think we'll have a robust discussion. So let's move on. Our next agenda item is value of carbon accounting. And Dr. Arnaud Brohe will take us through that. He is a seasoned consultant and educator with international experience in carbon management, sustainability, and ESG. Arnaud carried out the first carbon audits for the EU emission trading system sites back in 2005, so almost a decade, and was among the first consultants to calculate the carbon footprint of complex organizations such as banks, universities, cities, so fairly complicated, and also products, including beer, chocolate, textile industries. Arnaud was co-author of several landmark reports, including for the European Commission, and he's published extensively on this area, including carbon markets. Besides his role as CEO of CO2 Logic, Inc., Arnaud is Professor of Sustainable Management at the Free University of Brussels, and also lectures at Imperial College of London, where he teaches carbon accounting in the MSc Climate Change Management and Finance program. So, Arnaud.
Thank you, Monk, for your introduction. Thank you very much, Wanda, for inviting me to talk today. During my talk, I want to explain to you why we should do carbon accounting. I want to explain how we can do carbon accounting and what we can do with it once we have calculated the carbon footprint. It's going to be very challenging for me because usually it takes me 15 hours to go through this topic, and I'm going to try to do it in 15 minutes. It's also going to be challenging for you because I know that some of you might prefer to have subtitles. Sadly, I don't have subtitles, so pardon my French accent, although I'm not from France. As you have heard during my bio, I've done product carbon footprints for beers, for chocolates. So as you can guess, I'm from Belgium. So let's start first, why carbon accounting? Why is it so important? And as you can see, if you go outside today in the street of New York, 60 degrees, 16 degrees Celsius, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, it's not normal. We are clearly living in a non-normal world. And as we can see, it has been like this for quite a few years already. If we look at the 10 hottest years on record, they all have been since 1998. And in fact, every month during the 6 first months of 2016 set a new record in terms of average global temperature. So clearly, this is not a Chinese hoax. The window for action is closing rapidly. And this is why I really think we should focus on this. There are many other issues, and I really think the Sustainable Development Goals are all important, but probably the most important one is the one on climate. I remember 10 years ago when I was starting to be interested in the topic, people were saying, Yes, but we should not worry that much about climate change because we know there will be peak oil. We know that we have a limited amount of resources, and so we will have peak oil. And in the long run, we will all go to renewables simply because we don't have enough fossil fuels. And then prices of oil started to increase, and we became smarter. We dig deeper. We went to the Arctic. We went to new places, and we achieved to find new resources. So clearly today we know that we have far too much resources. If we were to burn all of the fossil fuels that we have, temperature would increase by far more than the 2 degrees Celsius target that we have achieved in Paris. It could go to up to 10 degrees Celsius increase. So what we do at CO2 Logic, we have developed a very simple approach where we always start with a calculation. First, we want to understand what's the carbon footprint. And we can do it for products, we can do it for companies, we can do it for services, for any type of activities. And I will illustrate this with this conference. So I've done the carbon footprint of this conference, and I will show you the results. Once we have calculated the footprint, of course, what we want is to stimulate action. So we encourage companies to reduce their emissions. And that's also very diverse. We can do it in buildings, we can look at transportation, but we can also look at the supply chain, which is why I'm very interested in collaborating with the Global Sourcing Council, because you can have a real impact if you can start engaging your suppliers. And I could mention one example of my client, which is Le Pain Quotidien. They've done the carbon footprint, they've calculated the carbon footprint, they've reduced, they've offset their emissions. But if they want to have a very big impact, they should engage the suppliers. They should work together with farmers to make sure that we can reduce the carbon impact of the food sector. The third step is about offsetting. Once you know your footprint, once you have reduced your footprint, there's still some carbon left. And for this carbon, you have responsibility. And the way to internalize this is to pay for the carbon that you emit. And by subsidizing a project, you can help others to reduce the carbon. For instance, projects or countries in Africa that do not have enough means to invest today in lower carbon technologies. So this is something we also propose to our clients to offset their emissions. And the final step is about communication and outreach. Once you have done something which is good, we believe that you should communicate this to other people to stimulate engagement and to make sure that everyone follows. So carbon accounting, you can, and it's very simplified, but you can broadly divide them in two categories. You have what we call the production-based approach or territory-based approach, where we would look at the carbon emissions on a territory. And for instance, if you look at the EPA, every year they will release the carbon footprint of the USA. So the last one that they released was the 2014 one, and it was about 6.8 billion metric tons of carbon. So you imagine how big it is, that all the carbon that was released in the US in 2014. Of course, this is just part of the story, because you know that most of the goods that we purchase in the US, if you buy an iPhone, it's not made in the US, it's made in China. So many of the emissions that are induced by our purchasing habits in the US, in fact, it comes from our consumption, and so it can come from abroad. And that's when you can look at the other way of calculating carbon, which is not just looking at the carbon that you have on the territory, but you're looking at the supply chain. And that's why you need to then start thinking about, can you hear me when I'm far from the, okay. No? Okay, I'm sorry. I should have taken
They're saying they want to hear you.
Okay, sorry. I will try to stay closer to the mic then. And so that's why we can then start looking at the notion of scopes, where we would look, of course, at your direct emission, which is the emissions that occur in your territory or within your company, that's scope 1 emissions. But then we are also interested in knowing what's the carbon impact of your electricity consumption, for instance. So if you consume a lot of electricity, today we need some lighting, we need a projector. So we clearly need electricity that does not emit carbon in this room, but there is probably a plant somewhere in the state of New York that is burning coal, or maybe it's a nuclear plant, or maybe it's an hydro plant, but there is a plant somewhere that is probably releasing carbon, and we need to account for this as well. So this is scope 2. That's the fact to account for emission from electricity. But then you can also go further than that. You can look at, for instance, the packaging of your product. So if you look at Coca-Cola, of course, the direct operations, Scope 1 emissions, but most of the footprint will be in the packaging and in the logistics, which is not directly part of Coca-Cola enterprise, but this is a very big part of the footprint as well. So it's also interesting to have this footprint approach, which is based on the consumption. When we have calculated the footprint, I think what government should do, but what companies can already start doing, is to put a value on carbon. Because people will only care about carbon if there is a price to pay to release it, or if you get a benefit to avoid carbon. And there are basically also two approaches. Either we have a mandatory scheme, which is the case in New York for the electricity sector. We have RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. That's the case also in Europe, where we have the EU emission trading system. Or if we don't have this, we can have voluntary schemes. Companies can decide to voluntarily offset the carbon emissions. By doing this, they will put a price on carbon, and that will stimulate carbon reduction. And there are different standards that they can use. So there is, in the US, the main one is VCS, the Verified Carbon Standard. But there are other standards, for instance, the gold standard that was developed in Switzerland with NGO WWF, and which, I'm really sorry about the slides. I think there was a conflict between Mac and PC. But, so if you look at the gold standard, it's a premium credit with a focus on co-benefits. So anytime we develop a gold standard project, we try to do the metrics to make a link between the projects and the SDGs. So I will show you an example of one of our projects and show you to how many SDGs it already responds. When I mention putting a price on carbon, I only mention cap and trade system. Of course, there is another way to do it. It's carbon taxation. I don't think it's going to happen soon in the US, but maybe like at some state level. What I also want to tell you is that today it's still Europe that has the largest scheme, but next year China is going, not this year, in 2017, China is going to launch a nationwide cap and trade scheme that should soon become the largest carbon market. So clearly the US are at risk of lagging behind not only Europe, but also China in this matter. This is one example of the projects we did for Le Pain Quotidien, and that's the same methodology that I decided to follow with this event. So we calculated the carbon emission first, then we work with them to reduce the carbon footprint by using more efficient cook stoves, by switching to LED, by trying to get more efficient fridges, but also today by starting to look at the supply chain and make sure that they purchase more locally and more organic products. And finally, they decided to offset the carbon emission as well. For this event, I had to take some assumptions. So now I would like to validate my assumption because that's an ex-ante calculation I did, but I will of course correct the calculation once I know how many people really came here. So my first question is maybe how many of you came by public transport? Who took the metro? Okay, so I would say probably about half of the room, maybe a bit more. Who came on foot or by bike? Okay, so I was not too bad with my assumption. I had 5 people, so I came with city bikes, so I think we are about 5 or 6. Who came by car, taxi, Uber, Lyft? So I had 10 people in my assumption, which is not too far, I think. Did someone fly to come here? There was someone, just one. I forgot to include you, and actually it's going to make a big difference in the calculation. So as you can see, most of the footprint is the food that is going to be provided at the end. Then it's transportation, but if I include your flight, it's probably going to double. Sorry. And then it's energy for the lighting and etc. One thing I wanted to mention is for the food, almost half of the, so if you look at the food, that's the green part here, and you see it's mostly half of it is for cheese and half is for wine. And wine, the wine came from California. And so I did some research and I found a study by National Geographic. So you cannot tell, I'm not French and it's not a French study. But what they show is that if you are in New York City And if you buy wine coming from California, you are going to release 4 pounds of CO2 just to transport the wine because it will be on the truck. While if you buy much better wine from Bordeaux, that will come by boat, the footprint is going to be 10 times lower. So sometimes people think that the footprint is just about the mileage, but it's not true. Like, you need to consider how it was transported. So of course, if you want your champagne that was still in Paris this morning to be flown over by plane, that's going to be huge. Like, if you use air travel, it's going to be massive emissions. But if it's boat, like if it's shipping, it's going to be much lower than trucking. So sometimes people have some prejudice and they believe that if it comes from Europe, it's going to be huge, or if it comes from the US, it's going to be small. It's not that simple. And of course, if you are in California, don't buy Bordeaux. That would be really bad, because then you would also cross the country with a truck. So what do we do once we have calculated and try to reduce the footprint? We support projects in Africa. So CO2logic, we have projects in Burkina Faso, in Benin, in Senegal, and we are starting new projects in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And these projects, we provide efficient cook stoves to avoid deforestation. So there are different types of projects that you can do. You could do afforestation, but we think that we should in the first place try to avoid deforestation. And so by providing more efficient cook stoves, we can reduce the amount of wood that is needed, which of course generates CO2 savings, but it's also a lot of financial savings for the local population. They save also a lot in terms of time, and like the cooking time is reduced. And most importantly, it reduces the risk of respiratory diseases. If you look in Africa, one of the main cause of mortality is still pneumonia. So if you can reduce the amount of particle that people breathe by providing more efficient cook stoves, you can also tackle this issue. One of the new projects that we do, it's the same type of cook stoves, but now we are working together with Trinity College in Dublin, and we are adding to the projects thermoelectric generator, so that once people have cooked, there is still some heat in the cook stove, and you can use the heat to generate some electricity for people to charge a mobile phone, which is very important for people in villages in Africa. That's their only access to the outside world. And so if we look at just this project, that's only one project, but we already contribute to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of the SDG. So just with one project. And yeah, the final piece was really about disclosure. So what we think is that CDP is a very robust framework. GRI is also a very good framework, but we are also looking forward to see what SASB holds in the future, because that could be also good for the US to catch up with Europe in terms of sustainability reporting. If you're interested in the topic, I've written a book on carbon accounting, so you can ask me the details. I can also send you a link if you want to get a discount to buy the book. Okay, I don't know if I have some time for questions, or if I was far too late.
Actually, we can squeeze in a question or two if somebody has one.
It's about 80%. 80%. Yeah.
What was the question again?
So there are 6. I forgot to mention, because I had to do like in 15 minutes what I do in 15 hours. But when I said carbon and CO2 this time, it was CO2 equivalent. So it's not only about CO2; it's also the other greenhouse gases that are covered by the Paris Agreement. So you have methane, you have SF6, and other greenhouse gases, HFC, etc. But CO2 is still responsible for about 80% of the total.
Our question is, this is knowledge.
Yeah.
And if you look at the whole Paris Agreement, this country now are becoming climate deniers, damage deniers.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, what are your thoughts on that? Because these are not mandatory. Nobody can enforce them.
Yeah.
So they want to do that, they're fine. So what are your thoughts on these such?
So I think the great thing about the US is that it's a federal country, and I will just tell you one anecdote. But in my own country, Belgium, for 1.5 years we had no government at all. Like we were fighting between the Dutch speaker and the French speaker, and we had 18 months without a government. But we are a federal country as well, so we had regional government. So what I really hope is that people in DC will not do anything, and that the states will do something. So I believe that state level action and cities, and also of course corporations, can do a lot. And I don't expect anything from DC for the next 4 years.
So it's not open play.
No, it's not pray. It's really like mobilizing all the other actors, states, cities, companies, NGOs, everyone else but DC.
Let's take a question over there on the far corner.
Successful or internal corporate emission carbon tax programs, and what is the major hurdles to their success?
So the question, yeah. So the question was, how successful are corporate programs, and what are the hurdles to tackle them when they have an internal carbon tax? So usually it's about the scope. Like for the calculation, it's both for the calculation for the internal pricing, but you need to disclose the scope that you cover, because, which I forgot to do with Le Pain Quotidien, for instance. Le Pain Quotidien, they've put a price on carbon for scope 1 and 2 emissions. So that's for the direct emissions, and that's for the electricity consumption. They did not include in the calculation, nor in the carbon offsetting, all the supply chain. And that's one issue we have. And if you start working with very big corporations, like if you work with Total or if you work with Holcim Lafarge in the cement industry, of course, it becomes really important to know what scopes you are looking at, because otherwise you can get greenwashing and people just offsetting their events or just offsetting the headquarters, but not the plants. So, yeah.
If I can take that question, I worked for a large pharmaceutical company before, so we didn't have an internal price for carbon. Instead, we had a slightly higher threshold on ROI for sustainability projects. So that's how we handled it. One more question.
What you can do as well is having revenue neutral schemes. So like you put a price on carbon, but all the money that's, so each of your subsidiary will have to pay the price, but then you collect the money in a pot and everyone can apply for subsidies, like internal subsidies. So Société Générale in France, it's a big bank, they do it. And so we have worked with several of their subsidiaries to help them calculate, but also then get subsidies, internal subsidies. So it's just a flow of money within the organization. So it does not cost anything. It's not like offsetting where the money is going away to another project.
Please.
Yeah, I'm wondering what you see as the role of higher education, particularly business schools, MBAs, supply chain classes, to kind of get the next generation students in there?
Yeah, I think it's really critical. And so I graduated in finance. I did a business school and I did not get any class on the topic. And today I'm lucky enough to teach this topic at my school in Brussels. I really think that every MBA student should get a class in environmental accounting and get to know about natural capital and the fact that we can translate all the things that we take from nature into dollars as well, and then use it in the decision-making process in corporations.
Yes, please. And one final question, yeah.
I love the idea of environmental accounting as you've described it, but this, as well as the supply chain, is also the use chain. And for a consumer, the supply chain is the big company, which in turn has the supply chain to all the way. And so, the challenge at some level is to have human capital accounting that links with natural capital accounting, that links with financial accounting, all in one system.
Yeah, we had a discussion just before, and I feel like we run out of time for like such a complex scheme, and really we are talking about decades, and the time horizon that we have to solve climate change, and I'm not sure, like we need to tackle poverty and inequalities, and that's going to be a huge topic as well for the 21st century. But it's not my area of specialty, and I still don't know how we can integrate tackling poverty and inequality into this framework of carbon accounting or environmental accounting. So we will have to have another debate on this one.
And Arnaud, thank you very much. It would actually be a very, very good discussion for our next segment, or a couple of segments later when we have wine and cheese. All right, so our next agenda item is our panel discussion. So I would request our panelists to step forward and come to the podium here. And while we do that, you wanted to say something, Wanda?
So we invite the panelists to the podium. I also would like to repeat that Arnaud's book is available on Amazon. If you go through Amazon, I submit that you use the platform Amazon Smile or Smile Amazon. And on this platform, you can choose the charity of your choice. Amazon dedicates 0.5% of your purchase and allocates it to the charity of your choice. Global Sourcing Council has a formal legal status 501c3. So if you have not decided on your charity yet, please consider Global Sourcing Council and make your purchases through Smile Amazon. Will not cost you anything, but we will advance the goals of global profit with purpose. Before I will turn the microphone to the chair of this event, I would like to acknowledge one very special person in this room. As we came to the end of 2016 and started a new chapter, certain things have changed. We have Angelina Udex with us today, who spent the last year organizing us, putting us in order as the executive director of Global Sourcing Council. As of the beginning of this year, Angeline will stay with the Global Sourcing Council, but will pursue the career on a more local level in the same space. As we know, all the global initiatives starts locally. So I would like to take this opportunity and thank Angeline for her patience, commitment, for her perseverance in bringing all that energy into one place. So Angeline, thank you very much, and thank you for staying with us.
All right, so we have about 45 minutes of our panel discussion followed by Q&A. And depending on how our discussion goes, I may very well entertain some questions also for our panelists. I don't know what I said, so it'll be hard for me to repeat. In any case, our panel discussion is 45 minutes. That's how much we've allocated, followed by Q&A. And depending on how our discussion goes, so we may entertain some questions also. Our main topic today is demystifying sustainable development goals and business challenges. And accordingly, we've put together, I would say, a pretty good set of panelists, starting from the United Nations to a couple of practitioners covering the business, and also a technology provider in terms of helping the businesses meet the sustainability goals. And not to forget, academia or universities have a major role to play in terms of research. So we have a researcher that's representing Baruch College here at the podium. So I will go ahead and introduce each and every one of our panelists, and then I'll go through the agenda in terms of how we're going to discuss today. So to my left, immediate left, is Ms. Patricia Chavez, who's currently Senior Sustainable Development Officer at the United Nations Division of Sustainable Development in New York. the UN, the acronyms are pretty long. So, so there she is. So Patricia is presently supporting the preparation of the meeting of the High-Level Political Forum of Sustainable Development, which is HLPF, if you can remember it. The dedicated UN platform to follow up and review the implementation of 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. So very, very much topical to our discussion here. Ms. Chavez has worked extensively in sustainable development issues at the national, regional, and international levels, has more than 20 years of in-depth knowledge and experience in international policy development and policy making. And prior to joining the UN, Patricia was a career senior foreign service officer with the government of Costa Rica. Moving on, to the left of Patricia is Danielle Healy. She's the Executive Assistant Social Media Manager and Sustainability Manager at the Intercontinental New York Parkway, where she oversees and manages the corporate sustainability programs. She's well-seasoned events and corporate affairs professional. Danielle began her career at Securities Industry Association, SIA, where she monitors state-level legislation and regulations that affected the security industry. Danielle later became an associate director at American International Group, AIG, in corporate affairs, where she managed and directed high-profile events. And she also collaborated with AIG's Strategic Philanthropic Giving Program and administered the AIG Disaster Relief Fund. And prior to joining the Barclays, she worked at Phasient, a consulting company where she managed social media reputation management, external communication, and editorial. So very, very impressive there. To the left of Danielle is Brenda Cockrow as the Global Supplier Diversity Procurement Sustainability Director at Monsanto Company out of St. Louis. In her present capacity, Brenda influences cross-sectional global champions in sustainability and supplier diversity, fostering an environment where collaboration can occur through the business with sustainable solutions and diversity of suppliers to meet Monsanto's procurement needs. And she has received Monsanto's Manufacturing Excellence Award, YWCA Leader and Workplace Award, to name a couple. She's presently serving on the KidSmart Board Committee in St. Louis and continues to be involved in giving back to the local community through many nonprofit organizations. Okay, to the left, wow, we have lots of great people here. To the left of Brenda is Pierre-François Talin. He's the co-founder and co-chair of EcoVadis, our sponsor also. Thank you for the wine and cheese, appreciate it. And he's our event sponsor. He is an entrepreneur with broad international experience in purchasing and sustainability. He's passionate about starting and growing innovative businesses, leveraging technologies, and that's basically how he co-founded EcoVadis. He is also serving in the Strategic Advisory Committee of the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, something that Global Sourcing Council wants to partner with as well. And Pierre-François has an MBA from INSEAD out of Paris. He speaks obviously French, English, and interestingly, Bahasa Indonesia. And finally, we have Mert Jemmer representing Baruch College. He has a PhD in finance and works as a senior research associate in the CSR Sustainability Monitor Project at the Weizmann Center for International Business at Baruch College. And probably Mert will talk about that during his discussions. He holds a bachelor's degree in statistics and MBA with a concentration in finance. And his PhD is in finance as well. So his research has been published in top-tier academic journals and presented in several national and international conferences. And Mert is also an editor of the Monitor's annual report. Okay, so with that, what we will do is broken our 45 minutes down into some interesting segments. First of all, we will touch on what the SDGs are, maybe go a little more in detail on that, the background of it, and how these were developed. We'll then move on discussing on the how the goals are impacted or how the goals impact business. So there, we hope to hear good things from or good activities that Danielle and Brenda are working on. And then moving on, we'll have some discussions on how technology can help business in solving these challenges. And Pierre François would have, I'm sure, will have some insight on that. And finally, on how academia can help. You know, what type of research can be performed on SDGs, and perhaps how can current sustainability research chime into or plug into that. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand over to Patricia. Some of the panelists have materials, actually PowerPoint to share, and some don't. So I'll leave it up to you folks as to how you'd like to present. So Patricia.
Thank you. I do have a presentation for you to share with you, but I'm really honored and privileged to be here, not only joining this amazing panel lineup. Some of them I know very well, some of them I will know very well, I hope, during the networking session, but also joining you. I can see that around the room are very committed individuals to sustainable and socially responsible business practices. So my role today, and I'm not going to bore you to death, but I want to be a little bit more inspirational. I think that's what the United Nations really are very good at. And you will have the opportunity for the other panel members to give you more practical view. So if I can be a little bit bold in my approach, I have a little bit of a video that hopefully will hit home. It's about our planet, it's about our world, it's about our home. So hopefully you will like it before I begin.
It means such completely different things to every person in the world. It's a house, it's a city, it's a country. Home is something you want to protect. People will go to extraordinary lengths to preserve their home. People love their homes. And if they don't feel that they have a home, they'll risk everything to find one. The further we find ourselves from home, the more we miss it. It's a question of perspective, of distance. And pretty much every single person who's been to space over the last 50 years has come to the same conclusion. It's the whole planet that's our home.
The earth was small, wide, blue, and so patiently alone. Our home that must be defended like a holy relic.
When you're finally up at the moon, looking back on Earth, all those differences and nationalistic traits are pretty well going to blend, and you're going to get a concept that maybe this is one world. And why the hell can't we learn to live together like decent people? On the first day up in space, we both pointed to our home countries. The third or fourth day, we were pointing to our continents. By the fifth day, we were aware of only one Earth.
We have this connection to Earth. I mean, it's our home.
Wherever we live, whatever language we speak or food we eat, the Earth is our home. We have to take care of it. And we should look out for everyone else who lives here. That has got to be our goal. That's why we need goals.
I wanted to begin with that to put us into perspective that we are all here for one particular goal, to save our planet. And that's why the goals are so important. But I want to begin with these three questions. What kind of world would you like to live in by 2030? Can we end poverty and hunger, reverse damage to the environment, achieve gender equality, and halt climate change? Is there something that we can all do collectively to achieve a better quality of life for our children, grandchildren, nephews, sisters, brothers, and everybody in your inner circle? Well, according to the governments of the world, as Wanda and Evan said, yes, we can achieve all of these questions in 15 years. In September 2015, 193 countries of the world, and that's the whole membership of the United Nations, agreed to a new agenda, the 2030 Agenda, and a new set of global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, which we said SDGs, 17 of them, and 169 targets. And those deal with poverty, inequality, food, health, energy, education, gender equality, water, sanitation, oceans, cities, climate change, transport, biodiversity, ways to better produce and consume goods, and peaceful and inclusive societies. And the 17, which is partnership, which is a cross-cutting SDG. And why was this agreement significant? Why is it so important for the world to understand and implement the SDGs? As Evan said, 3 reasons. Why this goal? Because these goals would guide the relationship between people and planet for the next 15 years. And you think that 15 years is really far away from us? It's not. 15 years will really fly by us. Because the residents of this planet have 15 years to make this world a better place to live in order for us to aspire a future worth pursuing. And because knowing and learning and understanding practical ways to implement these goals will have a significant impact in our lives, individually and collectively. Now, the UN 2030 Agenda, as the UN sees it, was envisioned as a blueprint to transform the world by 2030. It was a declaration of an interdependence. It was a promise to the future generations. And it was a plan to leave no one behind. Now, I realize that the SDGs may seem a complex set of goals and may look like an unsurmountable task to implement them. They are indeed voluntary. They are not legally binding. But, however, they carry a huge moral weight, not only for governments, but also for all the stakeholders, including the private sector. And I wanted to share with you this slide because the negotiations of the SDGs took almost 3 years, a little bit less than 3 years. It was lengthy, it was complex, but it was a quite inclusive process involving all countries, as well as civil society and representatives of the private sector. And they yield this amazing set of global goals. I'm not going to go into this, explain to you what all these processes are, but as you can see, there were several processes during this almost 3 years that really built up this enthusiasm for the goals. Now, the SDGs are not about finger pointing, but about holding hands. They are not about isolated actions, but about collective responses. They are not about exclusiveness, but about inclusiveness. In fact, the SDGs are a network of targets. Implementing one SDGs, as are not pointed out to us, will have a significant impact on other SDGs. And I know that this may seem, you may not see it from the back, but this is a web, as we call it, a web of targets that one of my colleagues in my division did. In analyzing data, if you implement one SDGs, how that will impact others. It has a domino effect. You have a snowball effect, which is important for our conversation today. Now, the SDGs is also about creating solutions that will allow burden sharing on immense challenges. that the world is facing for people, for planet, for prosperity, for peace, and using partnerships in particular among all stakeholders to achieve this, what we call the 5 Ps. Now, the private sector is a key component and has a significant role to play in the 2030 Agenda puzzle. They were specifically mentioned in the Agenda 2030. And why is it important? According to us in the UN, the private sector brings resources, human and financial capital, technologies, innovation, creativity, boldness, and adaptability. And why these goals are important for business? Let me share with you just 3 of them. Because governments are morally obliged by them. They will enact legislation, adapt their national and international policies, and create institutional frameworks mirroring the SDGs. If you want to work around the world, or even here in the United States, hopefully, your best chance to succeed is to know the SDGs and help governments implement them. Second, consumers. Consumers are a very well involved mass of people now, and they demand more sustainability practices from the companies they buy from or they solicit services from. Competitors may be adopting the SDGs already, giving them a leading edge in the market. So sustainability is no longer an option, but an imperative if you want to remain competitive. Now, successful implementation of the SDGs will need effort, and it will need commitment. It will expect all nations and societies working together. It will require all individuals to understand what the SDGs are. It will demand all citizens to take action and inspire others to take action. It will simply require a new sense of humanity. And I wanted to share this slide in particular because it's very interesting how this artist that some of you may know adapted the SDGs to his vision. And that is important for us to also take into account how SDGs are personalized. They need to be personally. They need to be personal in implementation and how you share them. And I just want to thank you from a resident of this planet to another. Thank you.
Good job. And now it's the perfect segue to see what businesses are doing. We'll start off with Danielle.
Hi, I'm Danielle. I'm from the Intercontinental New York Barclay. It's a hotel located on 48th and Lex. We're part of the International Hotel Group. Some of our brands are Holiday Inn Express, Kimpton, Even Hotels, etc. So how does our small hotel, 703-room hotel, make a difference in sustainability? Well, I've only been at this a year, so I'm learning it by fire as we go. But I wanted to show you how we did it. We pretty much tried to interpret as much as we could to our hotel with very limited budget and limited manpower. So this is our vision, which is lofty, but I believe achievable. And we base our program on the triple bottom line of economic prosperity, social responsibility, and environmental protection. So we also collaborate with different organizations. We believe that all hotels should adopt the Sustainable Development Goals, or we'd like to help them achieve it. So we work with the Hotel Association of New York City. I'm fortunate enough to have a boss, my general manager, Hervé Hudre, is an inspiration. He's a very big supporter, and therefore he's very helpful for us to implement what I think, and I'm proud to say, a successful program in infancy. So what we've done is we've taken all 17 development goals and we've created 17 groups, each one manned by a champion. So each manager or whoever's passionate about that goal champions the goal, and they have their own working groups to collaborate on what partnerships they like to put together and what goals they like to achieve. So currently, we reopened after a 20-month renovation in April last year. So this is a new program. And so we're trying to keep it basically hotel specific or in our local community in New York City. But we do hope to expand nationally, internationally beginning next year. So we are familiar with that slide. So this is just an example of how we've divided the workload. There's me up on top. But we also have like the Champion of Planet People, and for some reason you can't see it here, but we do have a manager assigned to each of those. This is our little one-pager that we sort of send out to our colleagues or partnerships, and it sort of highlights the front of what we do at the hotel specifically. We have a Charity of the Month program at the front desk where guests check in and they can you know, donate to this cause of the month. We have menus that, you know, I'm lucky that we have a chef who has very sustainable practices. He's proud. He likes to try to use locally sourced food and sustainable food. So there's a number of them, and I'm happy to send it to you. And the back page is the different partnerships we've had for each goal. So for example, some specific examples, number 2, Zero Hunger. We partner with Food Bank. We have a front desk donation. We had employees volunteer at a mobile market in the Bronx earlier in the year. And we also have City Harvest, where there are current donation in the front desk. We've donated over 63,000 pounds of food through November since the history of the Barclay, and we donate all our untouched foods to the City Harvest. For example, number 3, we partner with St. Mary's Children, St. Mary's Kids. It's actually a hospital. It's the only post-acute care hospital in Queens and Elmhurst. So they were our Charity of the Month in December, and we hosted a holiday party for them. We donated, you know, people donated money and time and efforts, and we had a great time. We had face painting and singing and dancing and things like that. But we also did a toy clothing drive, and we actually host events for them as well, because it could be quite an expense. For number 5, gender equality, we partner with Bottomless Closet. I don't know if many of you know them. They're right here on 52nd Madison. They actually are a great organization. They take the women who are going in to interview. They take them into a boutique that has like clothes, shoes, jewelry. Stylists will dress them for that interview. And then they have coaching, resume, prepping. But what's unusual about them is once they get the job, they bring them back into the organization and they teach them all about the HR, how to, you know, maintain financial freedoms, how to deal with childcare so that they stay in the workforce. So we actually did an employee bake sale. We raised $750 through the employees to donate to the cause. We hosted their graduation. We had a career day for them where the women came in, and we had various speakers that would hopefully re-inspire them for positions in the hotel world. So for number 9, like I said, we had our front desk donation. So here are some of the partnerships we did for last year, including Billion Oyster Project, Food Bank, etc. Number 12, this is a picture of a digester. We have 2 of them at the hotel. And basically it takes 100% of organic waste and it acts like a stomach. It basically keeps churning until it turns into gray water and it goes into the New York City sewer system. So it lowers the carbon footprint and our contribution to the landfills. Number 14, Life Below Water. We partner with Billion Oyster Project. They work to increase our oyster presence in the waters, which are natural filters of water. So we, donate all our oyster shells. The Barclay has a restaurant called the Gin Parlor. We're known for gin and we're known for oysters, in case anybody likes to come visit. So all the oyster shells from any events, catering, etc., is donated to this program, and they basically cure them and seed them with oyster larvae, and we contribute, I think it's 20 new oysters per shell. So an interesting fact is 1 live oyster is capable of filtering 50 gallons of water in 1 day, and 1 dozen donated shells can result in filtering over 8 million gallons of New York harbor water in 1 year. And then for Patricia, we're partnered with Studio Unite, which is a nonprofit who works with Soul Light. I don't know if you've seen these solar puffs, they're amazing. They actually are powered by the sun. For their larger cube, 8 hours of sunlight gives 8 hours of light. And this is very important for places that have no sources of light. So we're doing an event with them on May 15th to help fundraise. So some of the things that we try to do is partner with them by giving space or gift certificates or things that, because we don't really have a budget per se, so we try to work around it as best we can. And then here are some other examples of how we take sustainability to the hotel. So as I said before, we have a great chef on property. So to celebrate last year's UN International Year of Pulses, we had created the pulse salad. So chickpeas and pulse, things like that. But it's important because it's a big, it provides protein and other essential nutrients, farming, etc. And this year we've created a dessert to represent 2017's International Year of Sustainable Tourism for Development. So you should come by and check it. It's a secret at the moment, so I'm not going to divulge, it's just dessert. We also have right now the blended burger, which was inspired by the James Beard Foundation's blended burger contest. It's 25% mushrooms and roast beef. We're trying to lower the beef consumption. So that's our contribution. And this is how I view my motto of the hotel. This is why. So, you know, it's a small hotel, but we hope that together with our other colleagues, we make a big difference together. Thank you.
Well, Brenda is coming up very, very impressed. I'm actually impressed with the fact that not one or two, but you've actually aligned along all the goals. So that's really very impressive.
Thank you. So my name is Brenda Cockrell. This is my first event with the GCS. So I'm very pleased to be here. So thank you for welcoming me. So Monsanto is a sustainable agricultural company. We deliver ag products to farmers, both large and small, that help support them around the world. So we are focused on empowering farmers to produce more on their land and also conserve more of our world's natural resources like water and energy. So why partner on the SDGs and why integrate those into business? So climate change is already occurring, and it's impacting farmers, which are our customers, and it's connected to all other SDGs. We can be part of the solution, but it's crucial to have good mapping, and that's what we've done over the past year at Monsanto. So I won't go into all of the details here, but our mapping objective was to determine the degree to which Monsanto's top material issues align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and help determine how best to integrate the SDGs into Monsanto's sustainable strategy. So we mapped the material issues to SDG factors for each goal. In our mapping process, we consulted the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and took into account materiality, the value chain, stakeholder input to identify the strongest connections. We mapped those material issues to SDG indicators for each goal. And the percentage of relevant SDG indicators per goal multiplied by the number of relevant material issues addressed, we came up with the degree of alignment of those SDGs within our business. So the SDG mapping has identified the strongest alignment with 6 of the SDGs that strategically align with our business. Those in particular are the no hunger, clean water and sanitation, economic growth, responsible consumption, climate action, and life on land. But aside from that, we're doing a lot of things within the company that really make the SDGs personable. And our chief Development Council within the Office of Sustainability has really challenged every employee to find an SDG that's personal to them and that they can relate to. And we've started learning series each month, and he kicked it off with the SDGs and why that's important to Monsanto and why it's important to every single employee. So together we're working on solving some of those challenges and implementing those SDGs into the business. One example that he gave was the Model Village program. So we have sites all across the world. We have 20,000 employees at Monsanto, and the Model Village program is what we implemented in a site in India. So at this site, we do a lot of volunteering within the community, and our employees visited one of the local schools and noticed that the girls in the school weren't coming back after lunch. And part of that was because they didn't have sanitation there. They didn't have access to clean water. And so our employees, for a very little investment, built bathrooms, working bathrooms at the school. And so that helped to bring together a lot of those SDGs. So the quality education, so allowing those girls to come back and finish their education in the afternoon, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, and reduced inequalities. So that's just one example of how our employees are really making that personal, taking that volunteering in the community and making a difference for the SDGs. So that's all I have.
Brenda, it's very interesting. I would have thought, from just my personal standpoint, in a similar fashion as Monsanto did, do a materiality exercise to see which ones are more relevant or more material to your business, and then have initiatives around them. So that's good. So let's move on here. I would invite Peter Ponsaltaler to talk about how technology can help business in solving these challenges. One of the slides that Patricia showed was like amazed, how all these goals are intertwined, and if we were to somehow monitor that on a piece of paper, that would be a nightmare. So perhaps there are technology solutions to it. So keep that in mind in your discussion and as you introduce your company as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, I'm very glad to be here today because what global sourcing is doing is very important for us, and particularly when it relates to SDGs. So what I would like to share with you today is not only what technology can bring to this, but also what global supply chain and what the huge leverage of global supply chain can help to address this major challenge. And as Patricia was saying, we have a single planet and we're facing a major challenge, and the goal of the SDGs is to try to address those. But when we see the magnitude of the problem, I think we need to find other levers and to do it on a really wide scale. And as an entrepreneur, when we started EcoVadis a couple of years ago, our vision was to say that by providing global and reliable ratings and measurements of companies' performance on environmental and social responsibility, we will be able to drive change and impact behaviors in the global supply chains. And what EcoVadis aims to do is to drive this change. Out of the 20 million businesses which exist in the world, we think that roughly 2 million are involved in the global supply chain. So they are suppliers or suppliers of the major brands and they represent the vast majority of the of the activity. So what EcoVadis is doing is we have created and we are operating platform, a cloud-based platform combining software and analysis of experts in order to connect buyers and suppliers and provide a large procurement organization easy to understand metrics and easy to understand ratings on their suppliers' performance. And today we are creating this platform on behalf of 150 global multinationals, which represent roughly $1 trillion of spend. And on the supply side, we have 30,000 businesses across 100 countries, which are supporting, which are subscribing also and participating in this platform to report to their customers. But with this, we also, even though we've reached a significant scale, we realize that we are barely scratching the surface in a way. We need to do much more in order to reach those targets. So last month, we closed a new, financing round of $30 million in order to be able to scale up, this platform and make those data, those metrics available to a much wider group of companies. So when we started 9 years ago, we worked with a scientific committee to create a framework to measure companies' performance or suppliers' performance on environmental and social practices, which was aligned with what existed at that time. We did not have SDGs 9 years ago. So we aligned with the UN Global Compact principle, with the GRI indicators, and we created a framework to rate companies, which cover 4 themes. We are rating companies on their environmental performance, on their social and human rights performance, on ethics. We are looking at topics like corruption as well. And the last one is supply chain. So, we want this system to be able to cascade. We want, big brands to drive improvements, not only with their tier 1 vendors, but also with vendors or vendors. So we are also providing brands with ratings on what's, how their vendors are managing environmental and social practices in their, in their own supply chain. And so we've been using this this framework for, and we're still using this framework today, to provide, to create ratings. But recently we've mapped it, with the sustainable development goals, in order to see, out of all the data we collect and we process in our systems and that our analysts are verifying, or we could measure also the progress of companies on, some of the targets that are part of the sustainable development goals. And what we've done so far today, so we are touching at some point, or we are collecting data which can impact, all of the goals, but we are mainly focusing on topics like, gender equality, water, of course, affordable and clean energy. We are measuring practices of suppliers on, renewable energy. Responsible consumption is a topic we collect data and measure. So we're measuring what vendors of our customers are doing on life cycle analysis or circular economy. The goal 14, life below water, biodiversity is something we measure as well, not for all type of suppliers. We will only do this for suppliers of, chemicals, for example, or fisheries, which can have an impact on the marine biodiversity. And goal 15, deforestation, it's a very important one for some of our customers because of the, the impact of, palm oil and the impact of deforestation on the, some of the commodities they purchase. So today we are far from covering the entire scope. We are covering today 66 of the 169 targets which exist in the Sustainable Development Goals. But having the combination of 2 things, having both a technology platform and and support or validation of data by expert analysis, and having the leverage of the global supply chain, the leverage we can have through the global supply chain of our customers. We are able to deploy this, collect data and impact, practices of companies on a, on a significant scale. And we think we'll be able to do it on an even broader scale in the future. Challenges we see, because, this is far from being easy, and I'll share the challenges also. First, some of the goals are quite complex, and some of the targets and objectives are quite difficult to measure. That's first one. Second one, the demands of customers or the requests we get from the markets, from these big brands, is actually quite limited. I would say only 10% of our corporate customers are really interested to measure performance of their vendors, you know, using this type of framework. Luckily, those are the most, how to say, advanced and forward thinking and the most, you know, some of the most advanced companies. But, you know, we are far from seeing the adoption of those goals and of these frameworks and what we've seen from other frameworks like, you know, UN Global Compact, for example, which was, you know, very, very simple to understand in a way for companies. So, yes, technology can help. Supply chain are, I think, and that's at the core of the, you know, vision of Global Sourcing Council, is a key lever. You know, if you're trying to do this on an individual basis, you will never have the reach that you can have if you work with brands who are working with the 20,000 or 30,000 companies worldwide. And lastly, it's important to, you know, drive this through the most forward-thinking, the most advanced companies who are ready to embrace those goals. Thank you very much.
Before we start taking questions, let's touch on the last item that we wanted to discuss today, and that's around partnership with actually in the area of research. So what and the question would be for Mert from a group. Mert, what type of research can we perform on SDGs, and how can current sustainability research help with this? There's plenty of sustainability research going on for quite some time.
Thank you for the question, first of all. You all hear me? I don't know presentation. Hello? I can't
speak to.
She can hear. Okay. All right. Let's get closer. How about this?
Yeah.
Ready? Okay. Thank you so much, first of all, for the invitation. I'm going to be part of this panel. Let me start with a brief introduction, as per your request, about the project that I am working on. I'm a part of, called CSR, Sustainability Monitor Project. This is a project conducted by the Weizmann Center for International Business at Borough College, based next door. In this project, we collect sustainability reports published by the world's largest corporations. We get a list of companies from Fortune, US, and global lists, as well as MSCI emerging markets. So we have a globally representative sample of, like, every year, like more than 700 companies in our list. And we search for reports published by these companies in a given year. We collect these reports, and we, after we collected the reports, we score the quality of the information provided in these reports by the companies, by sponsors, on 11 contextual elements. These 11 elements are the ones that mostly cover the most common elements, topics discussed in a typical CSR report, including environment, including supply chain, including human rights, philanthropy, integrity issues, and 11 elements. So we have a good coverage. And we, our scores range from 0 to 100. The higher the score, the better quality of the disclosure report. We focus on sustainability reports only, not any extra information that's out there. This is basically what we do in the project. So how can, so going back to your question, how can we connect this with sustainable development goals? That's a very relevant question. Why is this information, important, helpful? That's the question. First thing is reporting and communication is an integral part of sustainable development goals. That's for sure. That's covered. But when it comes to reporting, we ask, disclosure from companies. That's one thing. We would like their contribution to this program. And the information we need to keep track of the progress towards achieving these goals come primarily from the information in these sustainability reports published by the companies. And our decisions are going to be as good as the information on which they are based. So, in other words, we need comprehensive, accurate, reliable, material, relevant, sustainability information. So, a relevant question at this point, I believe, is where are we at sustainability reporting? Academia and academic research can help us answer this question as well as many other questions. So we have seen, our findings tell us that we have seen considerable growth in sustainability reporting over the last decade, especially. But although we have come a long way, we still have a long way to go. Okay? If you look at reporting rates, your go-to person is definitely Luis Coppola here. Among S&P 500 companies, it was 20% in 2011, correct me if I'm wrong, and it has grown to, as of 2015, it's 81% of the companies publishing sustainability reports. So that's an increase. Forget about the numbers, like 20% versus 81%. It's not about the numbers here, really. What is important is that reporters, just 4 years ago, were minority. Now they are majority. So not if you are reporting. If you are not reporting, then you will be under our scrutiny at this point. So that is what has changed. But at the same time, okay, despite this growth in sustainability reporting, what we observe in our project, the CSR Sustainability Monitor, is that the variation in disclosure quality has also gone up. It's also gone up. We have scores around like lower 10s, from 0 to 100, the higher quality of disclosure reporting. We have scores around lower 10s to as high 80s. Even within industry analysis, gives a similar picture. That's interesting. That's shocking, actually. So, despite this growth in sustainability reporting, we see this, variation in reporting quality, which prevents us from making effective comparisons about company performance, which is what we need, what we're looking for. To be able to monitor the progress toward SDGs, we need to be able to compare these disclosures and information about the performance of these disclosures. What we need to do. So at this point, I think that's the main question of the discussion here. How can academia or academic research help? One thing that academia and academic research, I believe, can do related to the sustainability, CSR Sustainability Monitor project we are working on, is we can provide you with the necessary tools so that you can distinguish between companies who are really committed to sustainability and SDGs and accordingly report at a higher quality, and those others in the crowd who are not as committed to sustainability but still mimic the first group to get the same benefits from reporting. Remember the business case about SDGs. Even commitment to SDGs can create competitive advantage. Okay. So what we should be looking at should be how can we distinguish between those who are really committed, genuinely committed to sustainability, and those those others, what we call free riders, who talk the talk, but not necessarily vulnerable. How are we going to be able to do this? With academic research, like we are doing in the Monitor, we provide you guys the tools that you can use to distinguish between groups. Okay, so that's one thing. Also, with using these tools, you can compare the results, the outcomes, with the targets, right? So that you can improve processes. That's one of the things you can do. You can also, that also gives you, academia and academic research can also give you a better view of the big picture to monitor the progress towards SDGs and make necessary, moves like identify and address concerns and issues as they arise in a timely manner. That also can help. Another thing, we can, using the tools, we can identify and share information on best practices so that others can follow. That could be another thing. But I believe the most important thing that academic research can contribute to SDG goals, achieving those goals, is we can provide policy guidance to maintain, monitoring of the project, of the program, and enhance its effectiveness of the program, basically. That we can do with providing policy guidance. One last thing I would like to add, if possible, we have time. I would like to second what Arno said before this panel. I have a PhD in finance. I have an MBA, with a concentration in finance. I have never seen any courses related to sustainability, unfortunately, offered throughout this long period. I wish I had taken some of those. That would be helpful. One other thing that academia can contribute to this planned program, SDG program, is why don't we make sustainability education part of our core curriculum? Why not? I'm teaching for food, and I've been thinking about this for some time. Try to figure out how I can do this in a very effective way, not just to include it, but include it in an effective way that I've been thinking about. So first, it will make it more of a public good if we teach our students about sustainability, corporate responsibility, or give them awareness at the very least, so that when they go out and position companies, they have the companies more committed to sustainability and SDGs, and that will be good for all of us, and they can make a difference.
Thanks, Mert. So I think Mert in particular answered the question that the lady had early on. So we're at our 5 o'clock mark. Round of applause to all our I'm happy to entertain questions if you have for the panelists.
A general question. Now, we talk about a lot of these goals. Goals are fine. A lot of work that's being done, good baby steps. You look at the problem in the world, it's humongous. And one of the things that, the whole issue of the people with education. And I'm surprised, we never, United Nations, the great minds, we never thought about the people aspect of that. Somebody was saying, there were no people in the world, what would be perfect place. So the question I have, we talk about life is not a spectator sport. So starting from the education perspective, look at empathy, morals, ethics. Look at the Western society, especially now with the social media and all, we don't talk to each other. So academia could be doing more innovative work than looking at the metrics and things like that. So where are we going as a society? What are the impacts? And the damage we create is not bigger than the solutions we put in place. Look at the Middle East. We bomb the hell out of them, whoever it is. Same thing happened. Natural disaster, Fukushima, famines, and things like that. So they got to be a little more creative and intelligent approaches to this kind of thing. It's a great baby step. And that's one of the problems people have against the United Nations. So, political party. So, any thoughts on that from academia perspective? What are things we can do?
So maybe SDG is a baby step for it. And I was wondering if Patricia, you had a response to the gentleman's question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Very, very interesting. What I can say from my personal experience in working for an organization that I truly believe in, and for an issue that I'm very passionate about, which is sustainable development. One of the core of the discussions in the SDGs were exactly people. That's why one of the 5 keys that I showed you is about how we, human beings, and other other living organisms in the world can live together and can be a better place. So it's in the core of the negotiations. What is people? It's a people-centered agenda. And it's an agenda that wants to be transformational in that sense. We have only 1 year since the adoption of the agenda. So again, it is true, countries are just aligning their national sustainable development plans or their cooperation frameworks to the new SDGs. Some of them have done a lot of work. Some need a little bit more help. But because this is an agenda that is universal, it applies to all countries. But the other issue that the other issue that the agenda is to start the video and tackling those people that are more vulnerable and that have less resources to come out of poverty or to live a better life. So thank you for the question. That will be my
So here's what we'll do. We, since we're live streaming also, we need to wrap it up. We'll take one more question. And then, you know, it looks like the wine's ready to be consumed and we can follow up our discussion. So
thank you so much. Just wanted to know if anyone on the panel has heard of the Kingdom of Heaven and how it can address the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's for anyone on the
everyone to monopolize the conversation. Turning God.
I'll restate the question because I know wine and cheese is waiting. I wanted to know if anyone on the panel has heard of the Kingdom of Heaven. And that, yes, how can the Kingdom of Heaven address the Sustainable Development?
Can I answer the question? We ought to take note of Costa Rica, which is the happiest place on the planet.
I thought it was Bhutan actually, but
when you do the measuring, it's Costa Rica.
All right, so unfortunately we'll have to wrap up here, but we're all here and we can carry on our discussion. So again, thank you very much, panelists, and all the folks.
Before we will enjoy the wine and cheese, and we know how much carbon footprint the wine will bring, but we will be working on the offsets. I would like to thank very much the people who made this meeting such a big success. So to entire team, and especially to the new face of Global Sourcing Council, Kelsey Couch, who joined us as a new director, operations director for Global Sourcing Council, and also the director of 3S Awards program. So I would like Kelsey, first of all, thank for incredible work to bring everyone together in such a good spirit. And please also do share with us what are the next steps moving forward with the 3S Awards program.
Okay. Well, thank you, Wanda, and thank you to the board. I'm thrilled to be accepting the position of the Managing Director of the Global Sourcing Council and the Director of the GSC 3S Awards. My brain wrote something down because it was faster and easier. I'm fully aware of the challenge that is before me and before all of us, and am eager to roll up my sleeves and dive in. My primary focus is the beautiful 3S Awards, a celebration of the exemplary endeavors of social entrepreneurs around the world and their work towards sustainable and socially responsible sourcing practices, 3 S's. The grand finale of our year's work, like in past years, will be held at the United Nations Plaza here in New York City. Winners will be invited to participate in the 3S Awards Executive Leadership Bootcamp, where they will have the opportunity to polish their business skills and network with potential investors in order to nurture their projects and have an even bigger impact on the world. We're currently in conversation with Microsoft to host their our boot camp in their Redmond campus in Washington State in tandem with their supplier summit. And of course, the winners will enjoy the glory of the win. So if you are involved with a small to medium-sized organization that is doing great work in the world, I want to meet you. I want to talk with you. If you know someone, a friend, or any of your colleagues who are also involved promoting the 3 S's around the world, make an introduction so we can celebrate them all together. All right. We'll meet you over wine and cheese.
And the webinar.
And in case you have other questions that we don't get to answer today, we also have a webinar in partnership with SIG on January 19th, and I'll be sending out more information about that.
Thank you very much, everyone.